This video will cover cosmic clock times, and it is the third in a series of videos that are related, and hopefully you have looked at the um, Big Bang Law video and the Einstein's relativity law video just to get a feeling for what those two scientific laws say. And they are necessary for you to have an understanding of what the cosmic clock does. And it is really a combination of the Big Bang law and the relativity law that yields the cosmic clock. Again, you have hopefully looked at the Big Bang law video where everything started out in a small dot, it expanded, and then blew up in this homogeneous explosion where everything's flying apart from everything else. Also, hopefully you have looked at Einstein's relativity law video and seen that when someone measures a difference of time on Earth and someone else is moving at a velocity v relative to the velocity of light c, that they measure a different time. This different time is now known as the cosmic clock. So basically what has happened is we have combined those two laws of physics and resulted in the clock for the entire universe. The radiation that was emitted after the Big Bang is a wave type radiation, and waves, periodic waves, we all know are clock-like things, and so that's why that radiation is a clock. As that radiation was dragged along as the universe expanded, we end up with this cosmic clock. Now the universe expanded at very close to the speed of light for a very long time. It was a very small dot and it flew apart and very close to the speed of light. In fact, some recent discoveries have demonstrated that there are galaxies on the outer edge of the universe that are still flying apart at close to the speed of light from galaxies near them. Now, having moved at such high velocities, high speeds relative to the speed of light during the bulk of the time of the life of the universe, the clock for the universe was slow. Its time passed slowly. We've already seen that for example, one day in the universe measured on the cosmic clock can easily be 1,000,000,000 days on Earth. Now, what happened is that a nuclear physicist and now a rabbi, Professor Gerald Schrader, had all the information needed to put these two pieces of science together. He was a nuclear physicist and he is an Old Testament rabbi. And what he did is he calculated the cosmic clock has been kicking, believe it or not, for about 6 cosmic clock days, whereas he calculated that the Earth's clock has been running for about 15.75 billion years. Now this is startling, that he basically demonstrated that the 6 days of biblical creation, you may or may not know at this point, but the 6 days that are reported in Genesis of the Bible for 6 days of creation, Gerald Schrader demonstrated that that's a real 6 days, but those 6 days are calculated on the cosmic clock. They are not calculated on the Earth's clock, because 6 cosmic clock days passed over the same time interval when over 15 billion Earth years passed by. I can't state this too often, though I'll state it one more time. This is absolutely true and secular scientific result. It is not a manufactured calculation done to make 6 days be close to 15 or 16 billion years. It is straight secular science, and that's what Gerald Schrader discovered. If there's one book that I recommend everyone read from the list of references that I've given on my homepage of this website, that would be The Science of God by Gerald Schrader, which I believe is in the Biblical Creation tab. Read it, and whether you're a science major or a scientific backed person or not, you will get a lot out of it in terms of what Gerald Schrader has learned about the cosmic clock and the biblical interpretation of that. Now here is the result of Gerald Schrader's calculation in a little bit different form. And here we've got an axis which shows the 16 billion Earth years. ago. So we're hitting here right now at 0, and then 16 billion years ago, roughly, the universe was formed. And so here is the universe, being 16 billion years old. Here is the Earth, being about 4.5 billion years old, and these various geologic ages that you will see later on. You've seen a little bit of it to this point. If you've done these videos sequentially, you'll see more of it in later on in the discussion of the timing associated with fossils. Now here on the right hand side of the figure is the duration of days, equivalents of one generation, one Genesis day, which is shown by these two arrows. So there's day one of Genesis. In Earth years, it was 8 billion years long, but in Genesis days, it was one cosmic clock day. Similarly, for day 2 in Genesis, it's 4 billion Earth years long, and here is the length of it. The other days are equivalently shown here in shorter time intervals, but same sort of a large number of Earth years per Genesis day. Now, Professor Schrader calculated these times of Earth years versus Genesis days by using two constants that have been measured. And those two measured, I've already mentioned, the 10.9 trillion degrees is the temperature at which all matter ceased to stop forming. Once the universe cooled to that point, all matter that was going to be formed was formed, and below that temperature only radiation was left, and that was emitted at the result of the Big Bang. And the second measurement that was done is that the background radiation that was discovered by these two IBM scientists was measured at 2.735 degrees. And so 10.9 trillion and 2.735 degrees. A large difference in temperature of that radiation as that radiation was dragged along with the expansion of the universe. It got substantially cooler, very close to absolute zero, but not absolute zero. And Professor Schrader used those two temperatures to calculate these cosmic day lengths. And again, that's documented in The Science of God, the seminal book by Professor Schrader. I will state this one more time, and perhaps I'll state it again in the conclusions, but this is straight secular scientific result. This is two physics laws, two laws from the science of physics that are put together, and the calculation is done in a straightforward scientific manner with no preconceived, predetermined result to be expected. Instead, these are the calculations that are resulting from this calculation by Professor Schrader. Again, no faking, no changes to make it fit.
This is a good time to take a slight detour and look at the implications of the situation where someone or something is traveling at the speed of light. We've looked at the cosmic clock and how it has led to 6 cosmic clock days measured by the cosmic clock being equivalent to about 16 billion Earth years on the Earth's clock. But let's look at the situation where someone or something is actually traveling at the velocity of light. If you remember from the Einstein's relativity video, there was a single equation there which had a square root term in it, and it was 1 over a function in the bottom that had the velocity that one is traveling at relative to the speed of light. In that equation and that square root term, if one is traveling exactly at the speed of light, it becomes a square root of 1 over 0. If you remember from algebra, 1 over 0 is either termed infinity or in reality is just simply that's undefined. So therefore, as someone is moving at the speed of light, time becomes undefined. Time does not exist, does not proceed forward as we are normally experiencing here on Earth with our clock and our feeling and essence of time. Now what I'd like to do is show you just 3 verses from the Bible, and I realize that many of you are not believers, have not read the Bible, at least in recent times, and don't really want to be preached to about biblical information. But I ask you at this particular point to just look at these 3 verses as I talk about them and think of them in terms of what they say relative to science, in particular physics and the physics of light. So let's just take a quick look at these verses. The first of these is from 1 John 1:5, and it says, "And this is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light. God is light, and in him there is no darkness of all." Now that refers to God having an attribute or a characteristic of light. There are over 360 mentions of the word light within the Bible, and the majority of those refer to it as an attribute of God in this manner. I picked out 3 here just to illustrate them to you. In the ebook there I picked out 20 rather easily, and other authors have selected more, and there are a lot more that can be selected to give you this same idea that I'm giving you within these 3. But let's look at the second one, which comes from John 1:8, and it says, "He was not the light, but came that he might bear witness of the light." What a strange way to refer to a person when you're instead using the term light. And this is the situation here was John the Baptist, who was the predecessor or precursor, the person that preceded the arrival of Jesus Christ on earth. John the Baptist was asked whether he was the Messiah, whether he was the Christ. And his response, strangely enough, was no, he was not the light, but he came to bear witness of the light. He referred to the Messiah, referred to Jesus Christ as the light. What a strange way to say that, but that's the terminology that he used. And finally, let's go to Revelations in the 22nd book, verse 5, 22nd chapter, "And there shall be no longer be any night, and they shall not have need of the light of a lamp, nor the light of the sun, because the Lord God shall illumine them, and they shall reign forever and ever." This says that in heaven there will be a new situation without the need for a lamp, without the need for our sun or our moon to give light to us, but instead in the presence of God he will illuminate us. Now, all of these verses and the other 360 in the Bible have been interpreted classically by theologians and those who have studied the Bible in terms of the light being an enlightening sort of a phenomenon. That God enlightens us, God illuminates us, God informs us of things that we need or want to know. And so that is certainly a valid interpretation of this aspect of God being light. But myself as a scientist, I think and look at these verses and all the additional ones in terms of saying, gosh, it certainly appears that God has some aspect of this mysterious thing we know of as light. And so be that as it may, what this says, the implication is, if God indeed is light, then he is outside of time as we know it. He's not a participant in this pace of time that you and I experience throughout our lives. He is outside of it and does not participate in it. And from a strictly human perspective, we would then observe that God would not have been and is not bored in the human sense during the 6 days of creation or during the current passage of time that you and I are experiencing today. So again, this is an interesting side trip to know that we have a cosmic clock, and it has slowed substantially as a result of the expansion of the universe, but in terms of God potentially being light, it has not even been defined for him what time is. So let's move on and look at some conclusions.
Now, in final conclusions, the cosmic clock that you've seen here, it's the timekeeper for the universe. It is the one and only clock that has been ticking ever since the Big Bang. And as I've shown you, with straight secular physics calculations, it's been ticking for only 6 days. And these 6 biblical days of creation are therefore literally true. There were 6 days of creation that just didn't happen to be on the Earth's clock. They were measured on this cosmic clock. And this biblical God seems to have, he's indicating to us in the words of the Bible that he is light, and therefore he's outside of the time. Thank you for listening to this video, and move on to the additional ones if you're still interested.